Bonjour à tous. Hello everybody. Thank you very much for being here. Mon nom est Lolita Dandois et au nom du Festival Mode et Design, je suis très heureuse de vous accueillir pour cette deuxième journée du Festival Mode et Design, les FMD rencontres qui se poursuivent. Et aujourd'hui, on va avoir la chance d'assister à une très, très intéressante discussion qui va être animée par Eva Friede. Eva Friede est une journaliste mode. Elle est aussi editor. I'm going to talk in English also because I have to let you know that this talk will be mostly in English. So she's an editor. She worked at the Gazette for 27 years, including that she was a fashion editor there. During that time, she had the opportunity to do the whole fashion tour, if we can say, from Paris to Milan to New York, of course, in Montreal. Today, she writes a blog called The Constant Shopper that you can find at evafriede.com. And she still remains very passionate about fashion. I can tell you that because everywhere something's happening, she's always there, whether it's a very small event with students or something bigger. And today she's going to be talking with the founder of Le Château, Mr. Herschel Segal. And I don't want to say much because there's going to be a lot of stories that you're going to hear, and it's going to be really a great, great talk. I can't wait. I'm going to be sitting with you enjoying this. So thank you very much. Here's Eva.
Bonjour, bienvenue. On est très heureux aujourd'hui d'avoir Monsieur Segal avec nous. He's the founder of Le Château, which became a reference for fashion for Canadians for many, many decades. Before Mr. Segal joins me in conversation, we're going to view a short series of videos on the history of fashion in Montreal. They cover essential moments. They're capsules in time. There's Fur and the story of Samuel Grossman and his grandson and great-granddaughter. Samuel Grossman started in the fur business in Montreal in 1921. We look at the development of St. Catherine Street as a shopping artery and how it became the heart and soul of the city in so many ways. We're on to manufacturing with the Peerless story, and we have another Mr. Segal in the audience with us, Mr. Alvin Segal. Thank you for being here. Le Château is the heart of our retail segment, and we look at the fashion revolution in the 1960s with Carnaby Street, but we also look at the digital revolution today with Ethan's song of Franken-Oak, Mary St. Pierre, and Untitled share the designer experience with us, but we also have with us Jean-Claude Poitras, who figures in the video as well. And finally, we look to the future, where fashion meets technology with Joanna Brzezowska and Valerie Lamontagne. So we'll watch the films. It should be, I think it's less than 20 minutes, and then Mr. Segal will join me on stage. Bon visionnement, happy viewing.
Fur is a part of our heritage, often called the fabric of our nation. The fur trade, fueled by the European fashion for beaver felt hats, forever changed First Nations traditions. In the 20th century, generations of immigrants survived and thrived in the business. Samuel Grossman, a Polish immigrant, started in the fur trade in 1921. Grandson Michael Grossman stepped in, modernizing the collections in the 1980s.
After the First World War, let's say in the mid-40s to early 50s, there were many, many Jewish immigrants who had worked in the fur trade in Europe and who came to Montreal. That was their trade, and they were hired by various companies which existed here. And slowly the shift changed from the first comers, who were the early Jewish immigrants after the war, through the Hungarians, through the Czechs perhaps, and then to the Greeks, who probably dominate the industry now. I grew up in the fur business. I spent days, afternoons, weekends at the factory and watch my dad. But I never wanted to join the family business, although the industry itself fascinated me. So I went on, I became an architect, I went to business school, I worked for a bank. And then it happened one day that my dad was ill and he was looking forward to a long convalescence, and he asked if I would step in for a month or two. And I did, and it was, that sealed my fate. I was there from then on. I was there for the next 30 years. It was thrilling in the beginning because of the action. We had a factory of about 25 or 30 employees. Furs came in, garments went out. In the meantime, there were all the different aspects of garment making to look after. There was sorting and matching and sewing and assembling and finishing. The other aspect was the material itself, just the sensuality of touching all the different textures, from roughness of long-haired beaver to the silkiness of Alaska seal to the incredible softness of chinchilla. All those were very tactilely sensual.
Montreal was a thriving fur centre, staging the trade show NAFM for more than 30 years from the early 1980s. Furriers like Zuki and Natural Furs made international names for themselves. The industry is smaller now, but a new generation is emerging with names like Maison Elama and Lisa Lash, Samuel Grossman's great-granddaughter.
I went over to my uncle's place in Chabanel because fur was becoming so popular in fashion, and I had never owned a fur coat yet. And I said, I think I should take advantage of this before my uncle goes on to other things and, closes the business. And when I went up to his office on Chabanel, I saw all these colorful and bright, fun furs, where I had always assumed that fur was something that my grandmother would wear. But when I saw these fashionable furs, I decided to bring them to my house, wear a few around town, and invite my friends over to take a look at them and try them on.
Lash now runs a trunk show trade in luxurious, colorful, wear-everywhere furs.
The trunk show model works that we have hosts in different cities across North America, and we take over really luxurious addresses for 1 day or 2 days only. Women come and shop the collection.
St. Catherine Street, the heart, soul, and commercial life of Montreal. It started in 1891 when Morgan's opened across from Phillips Square. It's now the Bay, and thousands upon thousands have been strolling the street for more than 100 years, shopping, taking in the nightlife, taking in parades, and participating in the life of Montreal.
In the 1700s, St. Catherine Street was farmland, separated from the hub of the old city by marshes. Dino Bombaro, Policy Director of Heritage Montreal, walks us through the history of the city's storied shopping artery.
So originally it was a farm, an agricultural access, and gradually it became a leap outside of town, and through Saint Laurent, through Victoria Square, they started to move and create this as an east-west access, mostly residential. And gradually connecting these neighborhoods east-west created St. Catherine Street as a main retail.
Morgan's move to Phillips Square ushered in a golden age of department stores on the street. Ogilvy's, founded in 1866, moved to its current location in 1912. Ogilvy's and the Bay remain department store landmarks, with Simon's a more recent arrival. Others, Carsley, Goodwin's, Scroggy's, Hamilton's, Simpson's, and Eaton's, are gone. Over the years, retailers big and small, local and international, have populated the street, along with restaurants, strip clubs, theaters, and now the spectacular Quartier des Spectacles.
A street like St. Catherine is a place where people go when there's a playoff, there's demonstration, it's a retail place, it's a bit of a chaotic place. I mean, we recognize it's got big challenge with the upcoming transformation of retail, with the electronic e-commerce coming up and so on. But what you see also is that these shopping endeavors and retail company actually have created a legacy. You know, the building of Eaton is a wonderful building. Burke's is a spectacular piece of architecture. Of course, l'Abbé, Old Morgan's, Colonial House, it's a great building. It's the same quality as you would find in Windsor Station and so on. Mm-hmm. And all this is lined up, of course, with some more modest structure, but in general it's very good quality of building. Whereas what is the legacy of retail and shopping today, if not a sea of asphalt in front of a steel box? Unfortunately, at this point, we have the big challenge of the repair work. We are very closely following this at the invitation of the city. We are sort of on committee and so on. And I can tell you, I think they're very conscious of the very fragile ecosystem that they're working with. They don't want this to turn into a page of the history book that says there was once upon a time a lively street called St. Catherine. They don't want that, and nobody wants it. We want the future to be lively as well.
Montreal was once a major garment manufacturing center, but with the elimination of tariffs over many decades, the business model has changed. Here in Montreal North, however, Peerless remains a major manufacturer of men's suits. It makes 10% of its 10 million suits annually here in its factory. Peerless was founded in 1919. Herschel Segal joined the company in 1951 and eventually took it over, guiding its adoption of the engineered suit and its move from Pine Avenue off the Main and eventually to a sprawling factory on P9 Boulevard.
Hugo Boss entered our North American market with the engineered suit, and everyone copies a success story or tries to copy.
So you followed suit, so to speak.
We tried to follow that engineered suit.
Like many immigrants, Hossein Padar put in time at Peerless and other factories when he arrived in Montreal from his native Iran. Now, he's gone back to his roots as a tailor of fine handmade suits, working in his upstairs business on St. Catherine Street West. How many hours does it take to make a jacket like this?
Is by hand. If one person start, almost 2 days.
Almost 2 days.
2 days, yeah.
And in a big factory, how long does it take to make a jacket like that? Or how many thousands can you make?
Maybe few minutes, they come out, few minutes, around 2 hours, 2 days, yeah. Completely different. I work the factory total maybe around 8 to 9 years from different factory, because always any factory I go, they give you specific operation, you know, just you make a sleeve or you make the pocket or you make the collar. Never, it was the system I learned, I started, I cut it until I finish it.
Herschel Segal has published a book, My Peerless Story, recalling his mission to save the company. That he did, working the global trade system and keeping at least some manufacturing at home. So many others in Montreal and Quebec in Canada have struggled or have gone under, are struggling. What is the future of manufacturing in Montreal?
The future of apparel manufacturing. It's a lot to do with our import policy, the minimum wage laws. These are things we have no control over. We'll certainly stay in Canada as long as we can. We follow the political scene.
Montreal retailers are a pervasive force in Canadian fashion. They have always been innovative, ahead of the curve. Think Reitman's, Le Château, Dynamite, Frank & Oak, and Lole. And then there's Aldo, which has become an international power player in footwear. In the 1960s, Herschel Segal brought swinging London fashion to Montreal with Le Château.
The post-war baby boom was coming of age, and they were there, and they wanted something different. They wanted to make a new world, and they wanted to show a differentiation between them and their parents. So instead of the lounge suits and the easygoing styling that was around, they turned it bright, tight, and unisex. It was all about the revolutionary position of the new young people growing up and taking power. I think Montreal was a much more leading indicator of fashion or the changing world than quiet Toronto or any other Canadian city. It's the rich tradition of two major cultures, and taking the best of both, then you are open to other people. And we led for a long time until the late 70s, and then it became too political, I guess, and Toronto picked up the opportunity and people moved there. But I think we have it back now, and it is something that will even get better as time goes on. Well, I think our traditional retailing is changing, just like what we did replaced a lot of regular business. So if you don't change, you're not going to be around. Now, that doesn't mean you become a digital company, but you have to adopt and adapt. Most of the time, people can't see it until it's too late. So the big secret is to understand that there's a trend and to watch the slightest downward trend and then figure why it's happening.
Now, with Retail in Flux, Ethan Song of Frank and Oak has reimagined the shopping experience for the digital age.
I think when we started back in 2012, we recognized that there was a whole new generation of guys that wanted quality clothes, but also wanted a brand that they could love. So we created a brand that they could identify themselves to. But beyond that, we leveraged the internet and social media to spread the word and quickly build a global brand. So it's really the understanding of both the brand and the channel that allowed us to be successful so far. It's really interesting because in the past, you used to have like a one campaign and that was what you stood for. We've really moved from that campaign, philosophy towards more of a discussion. You're always having a conversation with your fans and your customers. So social media really allows you to kind of embed yourself in their day-to-day life. For us, community has always been important because we realized very quickly that the clothing that you buy are a big indication of what you stand for as a person. In some ways, you vote in terms of your values with your dollars. And so by creating the community, we're effectively creating a world that helps us to better define what we stand for and helps better define what our customers stand for.
Montreal is known for its creativity, and fashion is no exception. Certain names are well known. There's Marie Saint-Pierre, Denis Gagnon, Philippe Dubuc, Jean-Claude Poitras.
Jean-Claude Poitras is an elder statesman on the Quebec scene, a prolific artist on many disciplines. He made his mark in the 1970s with the label Boff and successful partnerships with manufacturers. Other success stories of the 1960s and 70s include Marielle Fleury, Michel Robichaud, Léo Chevalier, and John Warden. Today, Marie Saint-Pierre is pushing boundaries, expanding into the US.
La marque Marie Saint-Pierre a toujours été, en fait, une tension entre deux forces. D'une part, l'esthétique versus la fonctionnalité. Je suis à moitié nord-américaine, je suis à moitié européenne. Alors, je peux pas concevoir des vêtements comme les Européens parce que je vis en Amérique du Nord et le mode de vie est complètement différent ici. On aime les choses qui sont efficientes, qui sont faciles d'entretien. On a un certain mode de vie, en fait, qui diffère beaucoup de l'Europe. Ce que je dirais, c'est que quand on achète un vêtement de créateur, généralement, on achète un produit, qui est plus cher, mais qui a une pérennité, une durée de vie. On voit aujourd'hui des marques de créateurs qui se revendent sur eBay pour plus cher, qui ont été payées il y a longtemps. Alors que le fast fashion, c'est vraiment du porté-jeté et les coûts aux consommateurs sont pas identifiés. C'est-à-dire que ça remplit un espace de pollution. Il y a beaucoup de choses qui sont... On achète maintenant pas cher, puis on paiera plus tard les conséquences de ça. Donc, il faut faire attention. La mode est toujours Je trouve que c'est toujours un secteur qui passe au râtelier avant les autres. Alors, on est toujours à la quête de la nouveauté. On se modifie à chaque saison. On a un rythme très, très rapide de changement. Donc, forcément, ça nous frappe peut-être un petit peu plus dur que d'autres. Mais je pense que pour construire une marque, puis je pense que c'est partout pareil, c'est vraiment le temps. C'est dédier le temps que ça prend. Le défi, c'est d'être pérenne, c'est de rester. Ça, c'est la chose la plus difficile. D'être vrai. Ça, c'est la deuxième chose la plus difficile. Donc, de faire des choses qui nous ressemblent, nous, qui sont pas des copies ou des cut and paste. Si on n'est pas capable d'accueillir, si on n'est pas capable d'aider les gens à avoir les outils nécessaires pour grandir, s'il faut qu'ils construisent comme moi, j'ai construit tous les outils que ça prend. Oui, il y a un learning curve à ça, il y a un process, mais c'est très long aussi. Sinon, c'est difficile de rallier design, production, client, prix, point of sale, tout ça, il y a beaucoup d'enjeux. Les process sont très, très complexes.
Untitle's José Manuel Saint-Jacques and Simon Bélanger are targeting an international niche market. They recently acquired an atelier, their own factory in effect, to take control of production.
L'idée qu'on a toujours eue, c'est qu'on a toujours su qu'on allait avoir une marque qui était nichée. On a toujours avoir une niche et que notre cliente existe en petite communauté partout sur la Terre. Donc, notre nouveau défi, ça va vraiment être, pendant les prochaines années, d'aller rencontrer ces femmes-là.
Les avantages de la mondialisation, c'est clair qu'on a accès à un plus grand pool de clientèle. Il faut penser mondial, mais nous, on crée local. Pour nous, c'est important d'avoir un contrôle. On est des control freaks, donc c'est super important pour nous d'être très proche de la production, de la façon, puis que la qualité soit vraiment très élevée. Pour nous, c'est très important de faire local.
Ce qu'on essaie de faire, c'est toujours de garder des références historiques de costumes. Donc, essayer de regarder à l'Orient puis de mélanger ça avec une idée occidentale du vêtement. Puis le truc qui nous passionne énormément, c'est la façon, c'est comment les choses sont fabriquées. Donc, on a toujours des références à la couture aussi.
In our wired world, the stuff of sci-fi has become part of everyday life. Smartwear, wearables, smart bras, devices, t-shirts are wired with sensors to enhance sports performance. But what's beyond the sports app? At Concordia University, Professor Joanna Brzezowska is working on the textiles of the future for clothing that will change shape, color, temperature, and much more.
In the future, we will have all kinds of technologies in our clothes, but there's going to be so many different applications in terms of biometric sensors in clothes. So what we see now mostly for sports, tracking your heart rate, your breathing, your performance, will actually become an everyday kind of application where we'll be able to have deeper insights into our emotions, our levels of stress, to become much more in touch with ourselves. But our clothes will also create new experiences. One of the projects I'm working on right now is called the bodysuit, and I'm working with musical performers whose clothes vibrate to communicate how to perform the musical composition that they are playing.
Fashion tech designer Valérie Lamontagne is co-creator of a device called Synapseware. The challenge, she says, is integrating two industries, fashion and technology.
Alors, au fait, la grande problématique, c'est une culture et des structures de fabrication. Si on regarde comment les électroniques sont construits, on sait qu'ils sont construits à bas coût, beaucoup en Asie. De même pour le textile et la mode avec la fabrication du textile, mais ces deux industries-là ne se parlent pas. Alors, quand on veut mettre des composantes électroniques avec des circuits conducteurs à travers les fibres, intégrer des batteries, et qu'on veut mettre ça dans un vêtement, on n'a pas les mêmes expertises dans la même salle qui puissent se parler. Ça se passe beaucoup dans un contexte universitaire, mais là, je pense que très bientôt, on va devoir pousser de plus en plus à avoir une industrie qui peut accommoder la recherche et le développement des textiles intelligents pour que justement les designers de mode puissent s'en servir pour créer des plateformes expressives et esthétiques.
What's really special about Montreal is we not only have amazing designers, we also have a lot of really well-funded researchers. In any other place where there's a lot of innovation in smartwear, the innovation tends to go towards, like, let's say, the medical industry or sports or much more applied types of fields. Because we have such an amazing tradition and expertise in Montreal around performance, le spectacle, you know, and games, I think there is this special kind of perspective about fun and entertainment that really drives smartwear in Montreal in a way that's different than anywhere else.
Quand on porte nos vêtements, on veut que les vêtements nous rajoutent quelque chose. On veut se sentir à l'aise, confortable socialement, peut-être un peu sexy, peut-être plus professionnel. Et on ne voudrait pas que notre vêtement fasse le contraire de ça en exprimant d'autres choses. Alors, on va vraiment devoir négocier avec cette technologie-là pour se l'approprier à nos besoins puis à nos désirs. On s'habille, on change de mode tout le temps parce qu'on joue un rôle. Alors, la technologie va devoir s'enligner avec ça et jouer les rôles avec nous.
So, hi everybody, we're back. Mr. Segal, thank you for being with us. Herschel Segal was born in Montreal to a family in the garment industry. He joined the family company, Peerless, for a short while, but went on to study political science and economics at McGill University, and then he went to New York. In 1959, he launched Le Château. It was his discovery of swinging London, Carnaby Street, that set Le Château on its path to fashion glory. For decades, there was nothing cooler, nothing groovier than Le Château. I still remember I had lime green elephant pants that I got. I love them. I also had a little vest. I wore it for years and years and years. I would still wear it today if I could get into it or find it. Anyway, it was just a really defining moment in Montreal fashion, in Canadian fashion. Today, Mr. Segal is no longer involved in the day-to-day running of Le Château, but he continues to invest in what he sees as new ideas, and these include tea, candy, granola, furniture, and more. So I want to start by asking you about those early days, the 1960s, the revolution that you witnessed, the fashion revolution, the cultural revolution, and what made you bring it to Montreal? What made you start Le Château?
Well, I really got into the whole swing of things because I was 10 years older, but I felt like those kids in the 60s, being born in 1930, and by the time 50s came along, there was no room for rebels. So I stuck around doing different things, and when I got back into the clothing business, as you mentioned, in 59, so the 60s was just starting. So I identified with those kids because, you know, the new generation after the war was allowed to be rebellious, and they didn't want the big boxy suits that their parents were wearing.
They wanted everything tight, light,
they wanted they wanted a uniform for a new age. And so it was the actual opposite of what everybody wore. It was short, it was tight, it was bright, it was unisex, it was revealing, and that was their statement that they were a new generation.
You put some leather garments in the window of one of your stores, and that was quite a sensation.
Well, that was the trigger. Actually, it started because I had been in the business. I had come from Peerless Clothing, and I tried to sell regular clothing, and I couldn't do anything, but there was a lot of competition, and I didn't have any special skill. So I was about to close my store, and I went to a party, and there was a friend, and she had just bought a leather dress. And I said, "What is it? What are you wearing? It looks so alluring and sexy." And she told me about leather clothing and this Hungarian tailor that was making it. So I went to see him the next morning, and he said, "Well, here's a coat." And I said, "It looks good." And I took it back, and I put it in the window, And I was about to close the store the next week, and a guy came along from CBC. That's when it was in the old Ford Hotel at Mackay. And he bought it at a great price. I had nothing in the store over $35, and this coat was $125, $150. And he asked me can I measure him for a pair of pants? So I went to the back and phoned my Hungarian tailor. I said, how do you make a pair of leather pants? And he said, just like anything else. So I took his measurements and delivered him So with the coat and the $60 pant, I had made my day in those days. And I didn't take long the store was literally full of leather clothing, because I went 1, 2, 4, 8, and so forth. And I remember I had a younger brother, who was investing and was holding me up because I was running out of cash. And he doesn't come by the store, and he came by, and he was flabbergasted. He wondered if it was a different store, if I had sold the store, because it happened so quickly. And then, of course, when I went to buy leather in Spain and Italy, I stopped, of course, in Paris and London, and that's where I discovered Carnaby Street. And that was completely, obvious only there, because Paris wasn't, the rest of the continent wasn't converted. It was England in '62. And so I bought some samples, and since I came from manufacturing, whether it was a 7-inch rise pant or a 12.5-inch, you just made a pair of pants. Of course, you used much less cloth, and you sold it because nothing.
So you copied these designs from Carnaby Street.
I took the clothing from Carnaby Street. The leather came from other places, but the clothing, and then the fashion clothing from France was different. It was very tailored. So then there were short skirts and everything, because the women started squeezing into the brightly acrylic sweaters and everything else that I had found in the continent. And that's how it was, just by chance.
And it grew phenomenally.
Well, it grew. It didn't take me long, because I had gone through all my money, and no one wanted to have anything to do with me. I was a failure. And suddenly, I was a huge success.
And you went public in 1983. You collaborated with Jean-Claude Poitras, with Parachute. You branched into women's wear. Huge success. How did you do it? What was the keys?
Well, it was very easy. I opened a lot of stores. And what I didn't do, if I can jump to the end of the story, if we have time, we'll get to the beginning, that I didn't organize it well. I didn't take a lesson from the family business, which produced clothing, but also very efficiently. And I had been with my cousin Alvin, who was here, but he was there making this factory really efficient. And that's the secret of a business. It's not only the creative part, it's the organizational. But you need both.
But they say one of the keys to retail is knowing your consumer. So you knew your consumer. That part was obvious.
Good. I learned the customer experience right then. I mean, still today, I'm in other businesses, and I always start with the customer and not the theory.
And how do you get to know your customer? What's the best way to get to know a customer? Is it data? Is it being there? I mean, today it's all about data.
Each customer is different, and so you have to interview them. So you see, instead of paying a consulting firm to give you the answer, if you have a couple of hundred stores, for example, and you ask one question in every store 10 times, then you got 2,000 answers right away, and then you get 20,000 answers very quickly. And everybody asks a different client a different way, and then you have to adjust the answers, and then you pick. It's easy.
Well, there are so many tools today.
You don't take chances. Most people think that if you're a merchant, you have to go for you never go for the fences. You try and trial, and then you get the answer.
You met a lot of interesting people, Andy Warhol, He came to the opening of the New York store. What was he like?
Well, Andy Warhol, unfortunately, by the time I met him, he was not creative. He was just promoting things, and that was his business. You paid him, he came to your store opening, and he talked to everybody, and he left. So unfortunately, I didn't really get to know him, but other people I did that I was able to talk to.
Tell me the Rudolf Nureyev story.
Rudolf Nureyev came in, and he liked what we were doing, and I had a little upstairs atelier, and I went to make a suit for him. And then he came in for a trial, and I had Alain Stanquet, who was doing this hidden camera thing many years ago at CBC. And he came in and he quietly filmed the whole thing. But the cameraman squealed on us and told Nureyev that night, and Nureyev stormed into the store, and we were forced to, but he said, we were forced to stop it, and he said, but I'll look at the film. So we had a special screening for him, and he had his hand in the third position, and he was watching everything. And then he finally said, destroy it. It wasn't good enough for him.
Did he do anything really extraordinarily silly?
No,
or?
He didn't like it. He looked at himself, but didn't like it. So that was one incident.
Another great moment in Le Château fashion history, John and Yoko in those jumpsuits in the 1969 bed-in at the Queen Elizabeth Hotel. You met them?
Yeah. Well, they were very nice people. I didn't go to the performances there, but I was able to get in, and they were just hanging around in bed and talking to everybody, and they're very warm, very nice people. And always a twinkle in John's eye, and they were just normal, natural.
How did they get the jumpsuits?
I don't remember if one of them came in or somebody from their team came in. But then that's how I got in, because when they told me who it was for, then I went to visit them.
So Le Château is
I had to
obviously
check
the
the
place
goods,
to
yeah.
go. Well, clearly the place to go in those years.
Yeah.
You call yourself a new idea guy. You're inspired by how ordinary things become extraordinary. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, I'm usually fascinated, the business part of new ideas and why they suddenly appear. And you first can't see them. And so whether it's in furniture, but I've switched, and my latest thing is the tea business, so I have something called David's Tea. And that's a different thing, because in the clothing business today, it's different because people are not so concerned about what goes on their body, but what goes into their body. So I saw that, and I saw that there was a much stronger demand. And whether it's furniture or fashion or food or drink.
Candy?
It's candy as well. Candy's dandy, but liquor is quicker, you know. But so that's it, and then you have to see why the consumer wants it and what they want. Actually, you know, it's easier to say, it's harder to do, because if you look around, I've been in the tea business for 10 years, learning what's happening, but it's not easy, so you have to do a lot more research than one thinks. Because if you look around, Starbucks, who's a great beverage company with loads of money and loads of executives and ability and experience, they went into the tea business, or they bought Teavana, 325 stores, but then sold it after 3 or 4 years because tea is not coffee. So you have to see each product for what it is.
And tea is calming?
Well, you know, there's a reaction against the sugar drinks and the monster drinks and the jolt of sugar and caffeine. So that's a different thing, whereas tea is kind of more social and calming.
You talked about the fashion revolution of the 1960s. Today, we're in another revolution, the digital revolution. Can you venture a guess where it's going, what the next step is, how it's all going to play out?
In the digital revolution, you don't have to go out, so the bricks and mortar are going way down because people don't have to get dressed and go out, and they can wear their pajamas or no clothes at home. So it's not so good for the future of the garment business, except I guess in specialty stuff like business suits or latex. I mean, the tight, easy to dress clothing is still, athletic stuff is still good. But it's changing, and where it'll go, we don't know, because it's where society is going.
You said to me the fashion cycle is the life cycle. Is that what you mean?
Well, I mean, you know, there's this old gentleman who I used to go and see in London, James Laver. He was a keeper of prints and drawings in London at the Victoria and Albert Museum. So he actually, I met him first because he did a movie, not a movie, but a documentary called The Tale of Two Streets, Carnaby Street and Savile Row. And he compared the difference. So he was always looking, because if you're the keeper of prints and drawings, you're always looking at paintings and works of art to see what the hair style was and what the garments, so that you can place the time of creation of the work. So he was a very keen observer and a francophile, and he loved fashion, and he had a tremendous. Actually, he had given up. He came from stage and screen, or stage more, and then he became. He learned this, and unfortunately, he died early.
Yeah. Montreal, certainly the retail trade has been a huge force for Canada from Montreal. Can you talk about that entrepreneurial spirit, the two cultures, and how that affected you and generations? I mean,
well, it's a perfect place to start because we have the two founding peoples here, and that we had the English stuff coming, and we had the French, and then we had, of course, all kinds of. We had a lot of Italian. And so it was a very diverse society, and anything went. And so it was easy, and people were open to experiment. And it's a great city to live in, and I still enjoy it, and so do many people. And so it's what it'll do in the clothing business, I don't know, but it'll be whatever the world does, I think.
Do you think Montrealers dress fashionably? Are we a fashionable city still?
I think we're very, very, very fashionable in our own way. And
which is what way?
Well, just look around, you know. No, it's really a pleasure to walk around Montreal and see the relaxed status of our city.
You grew up knowing some famous people, knowing Mordecai Richler, Leonard Cohen. Any anecdotes about them? Did you
we always talked a lot. Mordecai Richler I knew in 1940 rather. He was 10 years old as well. And we were both, I met him on Park Avenue and talked to him, but then met him 30 years later when he came back from England, and he came in, we did a few things together, but it never really worked out. And of course, Leonard Cohen and I were in school together, because he was 3 years younger than me, but I had been out of school, so when I came back from New York and into McGill, Leonard was there, we were in the same class, and we spent a lot of time together.
Did you drink together? Did you
do
the town together?
A little bit, yeah. Yeah. So, and he always taught, because at first when he left university, he went into the clothing business. And in fact, I changed one of my stores. He wrote a book called The Beautiful Losers, and I have a picture of him plastering the whole front of the store with the covers of the book. And but then, you know, then he went on, of course, everybody knows what he did. And he was always playing the guitar in the early days, too. And very successful with the women.
Very successful, yes. We know. So what would you do differently if you could do it all over again? You said organization, efficiency. Anything else? Is there a bigger picture?
Well, I don't think you get a chance to do it over. It's easy. You know, you look back and you know that you could have done it not in 1 year, but in 1 hour or 1 minute, because you know the answer. So you take it and for what it is. I've ended up as a kind of a purveyor of not a purveyor. I'm a brand builder. As opposed to a purveyor. If you go into a major department store, you get all the brands. If you go to Harry Rosen, you get he has the world's best brands. But then there's the other people who build a brand, and that's product development. So that's one thing that's very important. Either you decide to manufacture and let the other retailers distribute your brand, or you want your brand to be the only brand available, so then you product develop it for the shelf and goes right. So they're both not easy, but you can't mix both. I find it very difficult to, except Apple, they did both. They marvelous retail. They developed a great retail concept, and they are, of course, super product developers.
So you're at an age when most people would rest on their laurels, but you're still going strong. You're still finding new products to invest in. You're still at the office every day. What keeps you going?
Well, I mean, I'm healthy, so I think why not? Because I can't do what I used to do many years ago. I don't climb mountains as high. Sometimes I do, but not too high, or ski or any. And I try not to drink. So you stay healthy, and it keeps you active, and it's it's amusing and enjoyable.
Thank you very much for
Thank you.
joining us.